Uh, so usually, what I've seen is that these sessions, that are late in the day, they're usually boring. So just to, avoid that, what I've done is I have a lot of demonstrations today. Okay. So before we start, I would just like to, kind of understand from you guys what do you think are the best things about web, and what do you think is the biggest security issue? I would say the biggest thing that is broken in the web. Any takes? All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is I come from Yahoo, and I am a security engineer there, and I do a lot of web security stuff. And I started my career as development, and over the years, I came across a lot of security issues. And I work with engineers in Yahoo to fix web security issues. And today, what I'm going to be talking about is how web evolved over the last 2 decades, and what are the major changes it has gone through, and what are the major security issues that we see today. Okay. So if you see, the picture that I have today here is very colorful. That's not how web was meant to be. Okay. So when the web started, it was a very simple protocol. Mr. Lee, he put up a website which was just text and links. So that was the intention of web. And nobody anticipated, I think, other than God, that web would grow like what it is today. Okay. So what has happened over the years is web was so flexible. If you see HTTP and HTML, they are so flexible that you can essentially tie anything into it. Okay. So over the year, you had CSS coming into it, providing a lot of styles. You had the big daddy, the JavaScript coming in and providing all the dynamic environment, and that is how we, do all the even the not just the animations, but a lot of business logic on the browser today, right? And during that time, what has happened is the web grew so fast that the architecture it was made with was highly vulnerable. It was inherently insecure. There are plenty of security issues about web. My idea is not to talk about all of them. It is a very short time. When I do such trainings, it takes like maybe a day or two to really talk about security issues. My aim is to discuss the top, the best, I would say, the most beautiful feature of the web, and what I feel is the issue with it. Okay, so let's get started. So I like Spider-Man. So in all my presentation, it'll have some Spider-Man quotes. Okay, so can you guys see from there? Okay. So we all know the first web was read only, and even when David Philo and Jerry Yang started Yahoo, it was purely a directory listing. You can click some links and get some addresses. It was not a consumer web. It was more mostly read only. And so again, these are like not standard definitions. So these are like what I think. It's all like my perception. So if you go about checking on what Web 2 or what Web 2.0 is or Web 3.0 is, everybody has a different perception about it. Okay, this is my perception purely. So we started buying tickets. We started doing a lot of consuming applications for our daily uses, not just for looking up stuff, but doing dynamic stuff with it. That is where PHP and other programming languages came in. And then we had Web 2.0, we had webmail, a lot of these applications coming in, chatting applications. Then we had the rich UGC applications like Flickr, or Facebook, where you can really do social networking. Okay. And then we are moving towards something called a semantic web, which is Web 3.0. Somebody says it will be like when you're browsing with the web browser, it can figure out a lot of things what you want to do automatically. I don't know what it means, but that's what they say. Okay, so as I said earlier, web inherently was never meant to achieve things that it is doing today, right? So my intention is not to really show that web is bad. I think it is amazing. It is fantastic. I just want to highlight what are the areas it is really broken, and the things that are coming up that will fix those issues. Okay, so before we really talk about why do you really want to fix things? What is really broken? I want to take you through some of the screenshots. We'll look at a demo of this one as well. So what usually happens on the internet is you'll be hearing on the news that somebody defaced a website. Okay, somebody defaced the Indian defense websites or even government websites, or even Yahoo, even we got defaced. It's a very, 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 very common thing, right? It's the single biggest issue on the internet. So what usually happens is, you have a victim who goes to a site, and then the site says, okay, no, I'm down. The real bad guys, they do more nasty things. And what really happens is that web uses in-band signaling architecture. You know what in-band signaling is? Okay, we'll come to that. So when you're using rich applications, you essentially do blogging, you really put text into it. Along with that, nothing stops you to put the punctuation. And punctuation in HTML in web is code, right? It is code. So this is how the code comes in, and let's say I'm an attacker, I put a JavaScript, okay? Now this could be a JavaScript I put in, or let's say, an analytics application or ads or a widget which is there on my site goes bad. And when it goes bad, you have a defacement, and what they usually do is, there is no essentially, the security model in the browser is either 0 or everything. 0 means you cannot touch the document. Everything means you can access everything in the document, right? So I build a site, I have advertisements on my site, I have sections for comments, I can upload images, I can send emails, and I have widgets, let's say I have a FB like, a Facebook like button. But whenever something goes bad, I have full control of my application, okay? So security of application does not only lie in my hands. So anything that is on the page, the JavaScript could be, injected by a user coming from outside, has the full control, right? So using injections, script injections, attackers can steal your cookies. They can steal your passwords. They can create fake logins. So these are like very common attacks. Now, having spoken about why you really need to fix these issues, let me come on to the main topic, what the major issue, why this thing is happening is, why this thing is really on the call on the internet. So, if you look at web, it is supremely expressive. So there were like so many protocols when I started my career. You had FTP and a number of protocols, but none really grew like web. Right? Over the years, a lot of things were literally cobbled into web. So you had HTML, and then there was provision provided to put script tags into HTML. There was provision provided to inject, or I would say in non-security terms, is to call a JavaScript from CSS. Or there was a provision provided to have the on handlers, the on load events, and on mouse over events to call JavaScript directly, right? And if that was not enough, browsers, introduce a new protocol called JavaScript :URI. Have you seen that protocol, JavaScript URI? So you can call those URIs from the URL tags as well. So like let's say anchor tag, image tag, hyphen tags, right? So it is very, very expressive. For somebody starting a career in web development, they can achieve a ton of things. For instance, I'm not a developer, but I can really do a lot of good things with web. Having said that, that is the strength. That is the beauty of web. You can really do a lot of things. You can really plug in multiple things. You're talking about HTML5 coming in. You're talking of ES5, EcmaScript 5, advanced JavaScript APIs coming in, and they can be really integrated very well to the web because that's how web is. It has all different parts, so you don't need to change something at the which exists to really introduce new features, right? Having said that, I don't know how many of you know, before even I was born, 2 decades before that, in 1960s, there was something called as blue boxing, right? So Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they made some blue boxes using which you could make free long distance calls on AT&T networks. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
right? So the reason is that when you're doing a phone call, you're sending your voice, which essentially is data, and the same channel also carries the commands, right? So they developed a blue box, and there's a guy, I forgot his name, I think it was some Captain Crunch or something, right? So there was a serial box, right? We eat cereal in the morning. So there was a whistle that came along with it. If you blow the whistle, it will send a 2600 Hertz signal into the phone, which essentially tells the telcos that the call is dropped or the call is finished. So the billing stops there, but the call is still on, right? So that was the big issue in telcos, and they really, I think, took nearly a couple of decades to fix it. So they had to replace everywhere, right? So this is exactly the issue with the web today. So you have HTML tags, and with that, within that, you are putting, user data. User is like entering something, it goes to server for processing, or a JavaScript on the browser is doing some processing, putting it back. Could be your XHR, or JSON things happening and putting it back. What will happen if we have punctuation with it, right? It essentially means commands. Now that was not bad. The encoding that you have for HTML is not the same for JavaScript, is not the same for URL, is not the same for CSS, right? So even if you encode, it is not like a silver bullet, because quite naturally, you pull things from DOM and put it back. Quite naturally, you get things from the CSS or URL tags and put it here and there. That's how the web is. But when you do that, there are a lot of edge cases, which is like, we are seeing a lot of them in Yahoo these days, that the encoding that you do goes off and you have security issues, right? So we'll talk about those as well. Okay, so here's a quick demo of what is called as process scripting. So you can just this is one of the examples where a user essentially is injecting code with data. Okay, this is one way of doing command injection or the JavaScript injection on the web. However, if you have a JavaScript that can achieve the same benefit, which is coming from a third party, let's say an advertisement, and we get that a lot from Yahoo as well, because we have advertisement agencies and somebody is compromised, they compromise our DOM as well, right? So if you see here, an attacker just posted within the comment section, they put the comment and also put a JavaScript. Okay, what will happen is when let's say a legitimate user goes and wants to buy the book, so user logs in, goes to the specific section, and when they click on it, what essentially happened was the JavaScript that was embedded or injected by the attacker got executed. Right? It's a very straightforward way. Okay, so this is one way you can steal cookies, you can steal username passwords, you can essentially do anything on behalf of the user, right? Okay, so this is what is called as process scripting challenge, which essentially is a number one security issue on the internet. How many of you heard about process scripting? That's pretty good. That's pretty nice. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we have different kind of encodings within web. Okay, one of the very common issue that you see is you have something like right. So what you have is, let's say, a lot of these applications. I have seen tons of these abuse cases on the internet. I've done a lot of pen testing as well, and I have personally explored a lot of these applications. What happens is a user name is reflected back, saying hello, welcome so and so user. What if I have my username as some script tag, right? That will essentially compromise the browser. Okay. So what I did was I essentially made a very simple demonstration here. It's just doing an alert. Essentially what an attacker will do is again the defacement, calling external JavaScript, or clearing your current DOM and injecting something bad into it. Okay. So this is a very common case. There are more complicated cases. So what if you have done security controls in your application such that you filter all the tags out from your application, right? Can you still do cross scripting? You can. So let's say you provide a privilege, or let's say a feature in your application for people to update their website links. Okay. And if somebody clicks on it, you can still inject JavaScript into it. Okay. So looking at the page source, what you see is this time the attacker does not need to have the tags, the HTML tags. Because of the power of web, you can call JavaScript from even the anchor tags. Okay. When you do that, you can essentially, and browser has support for JavaScript URI. And when you provide that, you essentially can do a cross scripting without requiring tags. This is again happening a lot in the rich applications. So you'll have the same behavior in CSS. I mentioned about the different forms of encoding. So let's look at this. This is something you see quite often in blogging applications, again in a lot of rich applications where you essentially put stuff into HTML context. You pull things via DOM, which is a very common nature, right? We do a lot of things, pulling stuff from the DOM and putting it back by inner HTML, you know, by reading from inner HTML, putting it back by inner HTML or doc.write. We do that pretty often. Now, let's see an example here. Attacker, let's say, what he did was he essentially injected a JavaScript, okay? But my application was smart. So gone are the days, you know, when you could filter out stuff. So it was time, you know, I would say, you know, my clients, you know, just filter out the tags. Today, it's the period of rich applications. You want tags. For instance, you know, there's some, you know, stock codes which are like they have an apostrophe or double quotes, and even the tags. So it's a user requirement. It's a requirement. So everything is fine here. The thing is encoded. If you see, there's no issue here. However, when I click this link, I will be calling the doc.title from the DOM. And if you have noticed, the encoding for HTML is called as entity encoding. The greater symbol is called as and GD semicolon, and less than is and ampersand LT semicolon, right? However, that does not hold true for JavaScript. JavaScript does not understand HTML encoding, right? That's why I was saying the web is essentially a cobbled language. It is not one language. It is a cobbled language. You have everything, you know, just punched in to make it work. So when it happens, when you call something from the DOM, it essentially decodes and sends it back to the JavaScript. And if you're not encoding back in JavaScript, you're going to have a vulnerability again, right? So, and what we're doing in JS is we are taking the title and putting it back on the browser. So, right? So, thing which was encoded got automatically decoded and was vulnerable. Just like, you know, this is a very common case that you see in rich applications these days. Okay, this is not just one case. So in this case, essentially, we called, you know, from JavaScript the DOM. But there are cases where you push stuff from HTML into the on handlers, and on handlers essentially they talk directly with JavaScript interpreter, JavaScript parser. And when you do that, again decoding happens there as well, right? So pardon me for, you know, confusing you a lot, but I'll come to the solutions, what we can do for it. The idea is to just really make sure you understand the burning issues on the web today. So another thing with web is, you know, it has a very accepting nature. So you can have your variables, you know, your tags without double quotes, without single quotes. I mean, essentially, I think the RFC says double quotes, but you can even have single quotes. Even if you do not have quotes, it's fine. Okay. So if you have such an application, what can happen is, since now you do not need any punctuation, you can simply do a space and you can enter your commands. Okay, so this is again a very common use case that you see. So what's going to happen here is, the regular use cases, I have a JavaScript function which has a variable as a number, perfectly fine, right? Nothing wrong with it. However, if the user input gets into this, you do not need quotes, you do not need the tags, you can execute JavaScript directly, right? And this is a very beautiful attack if you see here. It does not make any sense essentially, right? We are doing alert 2 minus 3. So what JavaScript, how it works is it is not a type language, right? It will just pick a variable and try to figure out what type it is. And if it is a function, it just execute it. So you can write it in, you can inject your entire malicious script and it just work. This is a use case. So you can essentially, put stuff back on the DOM. But if your input carries the JavaScript commands directly, you do not need tags, you do not need anything. You can essentially do a injection directly. Okay. All right. So that's about the variations of process scripting. This is not a complete list. Okay. So before we move on to the second one, how many of you heard about PHP filter? One. Okay. So again, this is not the complete solution. So what you see in today's programming languages is a feature. How can I? Okay, so essentially at the end of this video, I have a demonstration of PHP filter. So a lot of these languages which did not have, there was no platform on the internet which provided protection against process scripting. So a lot of languages like PHP, they start coming up with filters which would filter tags by default automatically when a request comes in. I think Ruby has it as well, and different platforms have it today. Okay, probably let it play for a couple of minutes, we'll come here. But that is something which will not give you complete protection, but like I mentioned earlier, today's web has changed a lot. You have a lot of rich features. So it is way beyond filtering stuff. You need to encode the stuff back by encoding it. And when you do that, you have issues because you will again try to do manual encoding, and anything that requires manual stuff, you're going to have security issues, right? You're going to forget things. So what you really need is a context-sensitive auto-sanitization, which is something really a bigger topic to talk about. But just to brief, the idea is that it can figure out automatically what is happening. It can figure out, okay, stuff is going from HTML to JS, let me filter it, or let me encode it. Okay, so we are seeing the stuff going from JavaScript to HTML, or we are seeing a JavaScript being called from a URL, let me take care of it. So that's what a context-sensitive auto-sanitization framework is. At the moment, you do not have a lot of it. Okay, so still a little behind. So what you have is something called as CSAS, which is a context-sensitive auto-sanitization framework developed by a guy called Pratik Saxena in Berkeley. So this is something he did it like this year. But before that, you had a lot of solutions like Facebook has FBJS, you have Auto Escape from Google. We have something internally as well, Yahoo, but we do not have it open source yet. Okay, so that is one thing. And how many of you heard about content security policy, CSP? Nobody yet? So the guys from Mozilla, they proposed a new framework which is called content security policy, which is essentially nothing but headers that you can send back from your application saying I do not want inline JavaScript, I do not want eval commands, I do not want XYZ. Okay, so once you do that, you essentially are restricting the attacker from injecting bad stuff onto your application, right? So this is a progressive approach which is under development. It was having a lot of opposition earlier, but at this time I think we have Chrome who's implementing it. So Google and Mozilla both are implementing it. IE has not done it yet. So my take is it is not production ready. But as a future-looking application, it's always good to have your applications done with CSV, right? So even as again, there is no better solution than defensive coding, of course, right? But again, you'll have some issues here and there. It's always good to have defense in depth, have content security policy, have auto standardization frameworks, and also do secure coding. Okay. Browser is the bar for making it forward is invisible right now. Okay, so we'll come to it. I mentioned earlier about mashups. So today's internet, it could not exist without the very powerful nature of web, which allows different origin content to live in the same document, right? We use iframes day in and day out, right? We use sourcing JavaScript from our ad agencies, from widgets, from Facebook Live, from Google Plus, every day, right? That is the powerful feature of web. However, web does not provide you a sense of control over what a third-party content can do to your application. Okay, so if you have iframe, so let's see if it is fine. Okay, so if you have iframes, you essentially can host a third-party page onto your application and make it look like a real rich application with a lot of, and what comes to mind is Google Maps and a lot of other applications widgets that you can iframe. However, there are some issues with that as well. So I will demo one attack on Facebook and one attack on Google where you can really, and these are like live attacks. So, we're in a good world. So there are known issues, but still people do not really, exploit it very, very, nastily, right? So don't do that. Okay, so I'm sorry for this. All right. Okay, so nice, again, a quote from Kochher. So, web just gives you facility to do whatever you want. But the bad guys like us, they come and find security issues. So we're going to talk about what those issues are. Okay, so let's get on to that. So the JavaScript issues we talked about, controlling the browser, you can do precisely the same by crawling a third-party JavaScript. Okay. Other than that, what you can really do is you can do phishing attacks like, let's say, so Facebook had something called as FBML. How many of you heard about it? Right? Was it good? Not good, right? And that is when iGoogle came up with gadgets. And gadgets just asked you, okay, you can provide me your iframe with whatever your language, I'm fine with it, right? And Facebook shifted to, FB tabs, iframe tabs immediately. Right, and they stopped supporting FBML. So good for you guys. You can write an application. That's what I did. So I wrote an application. I just made a bad page. Do not do this way. So essentially, if somebody comes to my page and let's say they click onto, so they don't need to click onto it. I can essentially do a direct JavaScript call document.location is equal to .href is equal to so and so. I can call it down directly. So I mentioned earlier I was wrong when I mentioned that you cannot touch your document from an iframe. You can. So these are the things which were missed out when web was being constructed, right? So they said, you cannot touch my document.cookie, you cannot touch my document and so, you cannot touch my anything else. But they forgot to remove the document location out of it. So what happens is, if I'm in a trusted page, and let's say you go to my page within that, and without your knowledge, you can essentially be misled into some site. And web is not full of educated users, I would say rather the users who are aware. Do you guys see that? Okay. Right. So people do not know about phishing attacks. They really get victimized very often, right? So this is a very well-known attack using iframes. So you have the same issue with iGoogle gadgets. You can have your gadget, somebody visits your page, and they can be pushed onto a bad site if you really want it. If that was not bad enough, it is not just pushing onto some of the bad sites. You can really be on the same portal and you can impersonate forms, or I would say the login forms, which essentially trick user to supply their user and password, and attackers can steal them, right? These are again live attacks. Okay. Right. So we saw that. Okay. So I'm taking this code in a little positive manner. So there was time when Green Goblin was more superior, had more technology, had more arsenal to do attacks. But times are changing, so there are more responsible companies who have the stakes. The browsers, the platform frameworks. They are coming up with technologies. You can leverage that to bring these issues down. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so I'll come to auto sanitization. So defensive coding is a very, I would say, broad sentence. What does it mean? What it means to you might not be the same meaning for me. My meaning of defensive coding is Murphy's Law. Have you heard about that? Right? It really holds true. Something that can go bad will go bad. And I've seen it within security industry. Because of the way web is evolving, a feature that is not really vulnerable today can be vulnerable tomorrow. Right? We had a number of attacks coming in. I'm not going to go into those issues. What I'm trying to say is, what defensive coding means is, this is my definition. Just give your code the privilege it needs. What it means is, if I am sure that the data I'm taking from user is text, there is no reason absolutely to use inner HTML or Docker Drive, right? There are safe APIs like inner text and all, and even your other frameworks like YUI, jQuery, they all provide it. So if you empower your code, the user data with more powerful APIs, you're going to have security issues, right? So use APIs which are not that powerful, okay? All right. I do not have a demo on CSP. Okay, so that is about process scripting. So if you have defensive coding, what that means is, when you are very sure that your data is going to be as data, it's going to be as text, use the text functions. Unless you are really building rich applications, like let's say blogging applications, comments, where you need users to specify like bold tags, headers and all. There you would need to pass on headers. But therein you need to have functions which just allow those kind of tags to get in. Okay, that's defensive coding. Okay, so I think we are fine now. We have, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes on this. This is called as sanitization, auto sanitization. So PHP has this, Ruby has this. So let's say, I'm a programmer, I do not have any knowledge about security. Okay? And what I believe is good security is automatic. It should not be requiring users, programmers to really implement security. It should do things automatically. And that's what PHP filter does. Again, there is no silver bullet to security. So PHP filter will not solve all your problems. So there is stuff going on. Okay, so yeah. So at this moment, we do not have the PHP filter implemented. So a programmer who just started writing in PHP had a cluster scripting issue. So what we will do now is we'll go to php.ini and enable PHP the filter API, and you can specify the default function as well. What it says is I'm going to treat everything as string. What it means is alphanumeric is allowed, tags are not allowed, right? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Is this PHP filter something similar to ESAPI?
Okay, so that's a very nice question. So ESAPI is something from OS. They wrote ESAPI, it is more of language independent. However, there's a big difference between PHP filter and ESAPI. ESAPI requires you to do manual standardization, right? So there's a function, you can call it and you can filter, you can encode stuff. PHP filter sits on your Apache as a DLL or an API, and whenever your input is getting in, it filters it right there. You don't need to call it. You can call it as well from your, let's say, I want to invite people to specify bold stuff. I want to allow bold tags. So you essentially can filter the stuff there, and then you can call the PHP filter again and say, okay, give me the tags back. These tags are allowed, like that. So there's a big difference between ESAPI and PHP filter. Okay, so this was the attack earlier without PHP filter, and this was after implementing PHP filter. So, okay, so coming on to HTML5, how many of you know about HTML5? I guess pretty much everybody, right? That's the buzzword today. How many of you know about EcmaScript 5? Strict mode, okay, iframe sandbox, post message. Okay, perfect. So these are the new advancements. So like I mentioned, Green Goblin was very strong, but Spidey is becoming stronger now. So all these committees, W3C, What Working Group, so they have come up with new standards. And they've augmented stuff into HTML5 standard, into EcmaScript 5 standard, and made some advanced JavaScript APIs which empower the existing beautiful stuff that you have with web to become even better, and I would say stronger in this scenario. Okay, so let's see what it is. Okay. So at this moment, these things are not production ready. So you cannot use them right away today. This will take like a couple of years. So idea of showing this to you today is you can like keep tab on it. So I have a link on a presentation. You can go onto that and you can figure out what is the acceptance level in different browsers. Okay, so on my left hand side I have Firefox, which does not support it. And you have, on the right hand side, I have Chrome. So what's happening here is, this is a plain example from W3 schools, right? So it's a very good site actually. I have an iframe which essentially does a XHR call and gets data. So essentially it's doing a JavaScript call, okay? What I have in my code is, I'm saying allow same origin, allow scripts. So it is working fine. However, when you will be changing that, when you remove it, so one of the good things with sandboxes, by default it is secure. So if you just call it sandbox, by default scripts are not allowed. So you cannot really change document location. So all the attacks that you have on Facebook, iGoogle, or your advertisements going rogue, they will not work with iframes. Okay, you cannot do phishing anymore. And things I did with Facebook, where I popped up a login to simulate a, what I would say, put a malicious Facebook login. You cannot do it anymore with iframe sandbox. So I can do it in Firefox. But once you remove allow forms, you cannot submit forms, right? So this is one of the upcoming feature, I do not know what Mozilla is going to do about it. I'm 100% sure I'm going to implement it simply because they had a specification for sandbox in their CSP specification. But since HTML5 adopted sandbox as part of the iframe standard, you're going to see sandbox implemented by all the major browsers, I think, in a couple of years. Okay. So when you're doing mashups, you need two things. You need separation. That my site is secure. I do not want my analytics, my advertisements, my widgets, my Facebook like or XYZ to do bad things to me, or even steal information from me, right? Maybe not cookies, but something stealth, which is not really detectable. Okay. You need a separation, but you also need communication. For instance, when we Google Maps, you need to communicate with your Google Map, and in iframes you cannot do it. In iframe, you can essentially compromise a document, but you cannot communicate with it. It's a very strange phenomenon. So you have something called as post message, which is again a specification in HTML5, which allows you the privilege to do cross-domain communication between the two iframes. So you can literally talk between iframes without compromising security. And post message is nearly production ready. I think it is working in 85% browsers at this time, more than 85 actually. So this is an example of post message in IE. What I'm doing here is I have an iframe which is from a different domain. It is you can see JS bin, and I have a different main document domain, right? So it's a cross domain stuff that we're doing here. And the future is when you're browsing on internet based on what emails you are checking, what stuff you're doing, what are your preferences, what do you have on the browser. You want to have have you heard of web workers? Again, HTML5 specifications. These are like async JavaScript running without stopping your browser. They want to run and figure out stuff that really makes sense to advertiser and communicate with them. Okay, so coming back to my presentation, right? So you have iframe, sandbox, and post message, which can deliver you near secure mashups, and not so far in the future. Okay, I think I have another 5 minutes. All right. Along with that, CSP, by a side effect, provides you to make better mashups. What if I want to allow an iframe to have some scripts, right? And believe me, you will really need some of the advertisements to allow doing scripting. However, you do not want them to do bad things like eval and all, which can do bad stuff to your main, your parent document, right? So you can block those things with CSP. It's a side effect. In EcmaScript 5, the new standard, they've implemented something called a strict mode. Strict mode, as of this writing, it is mostly implemented in Firefox, and some of it in, not some of it, I think nearly, 80% specification is done in Chrome as well. And I think in another year, you're going to see even IE10. I think IE10 already does it as well. So you can have support for it. What strict mode does is, you can essentially have a script tag and specify use strict. Okay, that's one small line. The older browsers which do not understand EcmaScript 5 will reject that line as command, and the guys who understand will say, okay, I am not going to allow the global namespace pollution. You know what that is? So if you come from languages like PHP, the variables are local to the page. However, JavaScript has the notion of implied globals. Anything you specify, let's say A is equal to something, it becomes part of the global, and anybody can access it, right? So what if I have a function which does, let's say, some account calculation, and there's a guy, third-party JavaScript, or let's say one of your friends do not know about your code, they came and tried to similar, and they clobbered your variable, right? So all those things can be taken care by ES5. There's some bad APIs. I wouldn't say bad, I would say powerful APIs which can be really misused, like eval. like new function, like set timeout, and of course set, there's another one as well. So all of these APIs can be banned with ES5 automatically, right? So you can solve the problem of bad APIs, global name pollution, and a number of other attacks as well. Okay, a word of caution. So these are all written away. So you have something called as Kaha, which is again a sandboxing on the server side, done by Google, but you know it has not really taken off very well. It has its own issue because the way web is, everybody wants to do stuff faster without without getting a lot of errors. But all these technologies which come from security domain, they do not let you do things the way you want to. Okay. So that's all I have. As I mentioned earlier, there's tons of things to talk about on web security. I just picked the number one issue, which is the JavaScript, how you can abuse by when you want to really make rich applications. There is a lot more you can do, but I think that's for some other day.